So good morning everybody, thanks for getting up early. I almost didn't get here, that's a much more exciting story. So, I'm guessing, are you all in startups? Or kind of involved in startups, or a mixture? The interesting thing about any business, really, especially digital business, is that it's about ideas. Digital businesses especially, most of the value comes from the ideas in that business. And as with the talk today, the key is really thinking about how you protect them. My view in terms of any business is that when you start to look at it, the value is what's unique to you, what makes you be able to sell your services or product in advance of other people, and it means you have something slightly different. And it's really working out how you then protect that as you go forward. So what I want to kind of walk through today is how that then knocks into something called intellectual property. So does any of you have any intellectual property that you protect today?
Yeah, I've got a registered trademark and some materials of copyright.
Okay, which is good. Anybody else?
Copyright.
You've got copyright. I think what's always interesting with business is that they might have one or two. The key really is for a business to make a value out of it is to have it integrated. Because there's never one thing that's a killer piece of IP or a killer idea. It's actually having a series of things which are connected, and how that connection goes together is actually where the value of the business is. And we'll go through some case studies as to how that kind of makes sense. I'm not going to go through it all because we haven't got time, but I just want to give you a view that's quite a lot of different types of IP. And depending on your business, you might have one, you might have all, you might only have a mixture of them. But depending on how you develop your business and at what time, you'll probably have all of them at some point. And the key is really how you manage all of them and how that you bring them together to protect what you're doing. Now, here's a killer question. In terms of the ideas you have, what's the most important thing? The ideas? Well, that's kind of it really. It's probably the one that you didn't think about that actually is the most important one, because it's whatever your competitor or somebody else goes, oh, I think that's a great idea, you haven't protected it, so therefore I can then utilise it. So the key really is to assess it and think about not just in isolation of what you're protecting about you, but what other people can take advantage of. Because that's the biggest issue. Protecting your assets is great, it's about how other people can make use of them if you don't protect them. I always think it's worth any business, one, because actually it starts to really help you from a marketing sense, is to list out what you think makes you unique about a business. Because once you start to do that, you start to actually get to the essence of what your business is about. But more importantly, you can then decide how you protect what you've actually got as the things that make your business or your ideas unique to you. Now this is a more broad question. Is that, so you've got this list of ideas, why should you protect it? Well, there's some good evidence out there that businesses that do protect it have a significantly higher value when they're valued to others. There's a study by the World Trademark Authority that says they're typically twice the value. And that's really because investors like IP. IP gives them some surety, especially with digital businesses, which is mostly about ideas. There's no bricks and mortar, there's no product. A piece of IP really helps cement that investment or that funding going forward. A large volume of the work I do is about helping startups get funding, and getting funding through actually putting together an IP plan that investors go, I get that, it's really useful to me, and I can see that I've got an asset that I'm investing in, and I want to take this business forward. I'm going to go through very quickly some case studies, just to give you a flavour of some of the ideas and some of the things that we're talking about. Okay. Quick question, what do you think the most common thing that's taken from any business?
Contacts.
Pretty much, yeah. That's actually true. Is that effectively, if you're in a small business and there's only a few of you, if one of that team leaves, that probably is the most disastrous thing for you to happen to you if they take away the contacts, if they take away the idea. So to a small business, even to slightly larger businesses, key staff are actually really important to you. So understanding what ideas they have and what you share with them, and how, if they leave, you're protected by that. It's not just about the contract you have in terms of the employment contract, it's understanding what information they have and they can walk away with that to actually impact your business. Because for a small to medium business, it can be really key to your survival if you are having ideas walk out the door. We're in a digital age, you're all digital businesses. How many of you have a number of social media platforms in terms of? So let's go. Do you have 4? Okay. There are over 250, and it's growing by the day. So depending on your market, some of them are really important, some are not. But more importantly, it's making sure that you're clear as to what your customers want. And more importantly, what your competitors are on as well, because actually, if you don't register them, other people register them. A lot of the work I do is clearing people's names off Twitter, where a company has had a name and it's been taken by somebody else to use for God knows what. But the issue more is it's free. Understand what areas of social media are being used, and even if you're not going to use it, it's worth having. A number of times I've seen customers who go, I don't use Facebook, why would I want to have it? And then somebody's posting stuff about them, using their name, using their brand, and they're not even aware of it because they're not looking. It really is very important to you to be clear as to what outlets you need to cover. And that is constantly changing. What's in and out of fashion. You know, a year ago, Periscope started, it's one of the most popular social media platforms now. And it's that constant evolution is really quite important for you. It's not something you can be static around. We talked about brand. Again, in the types of businesses you're all in, brand is really important to you. It's kind of key to then decide how you protect it and in which market. The downside of trademarks is that you might trademark in the UK, that doesn't cover you for the US, it doesn't cover you for Singapore. Businesses, especially at your size, don't have an infinite pot of money to protect your trademark everywhere. Even large brands don't. So the question then is where do you do it and how do you do it and over what time period? Again, from my perspective, the important thing is to really set it by where you're selling. If you're selling loads of services into Singapore, you probably need to think about how you protect yourself in Singapore. If you're worried that someone is your biggest competitor is in China, you probably need to worry about China. But if you're worried about what's happening in Azerbaijan, it's probably unlikely because there's not much of a market for you there and there's not likely to be any competition there. So you really have to assess it against your business plan. So wherever your business is going in terms of the services that you're offering and how that service is going to be taken up and what competition are going to do, you need to assess that and decide how you're going to protect it. The key thing about brand protection, and especially with trademarks, is that you think, oh great, I've got a trademark, it's all done. Unfortunately, the way the trademark world works is that you don't have to protect it, and it is up to you to decide if somebody is actually infringing your brand. So you have to be vigilant as to what's going on and how you do it.
So can I just ask a question?
Let's go.
What is brand? Is that name, logo, colour? What actually is brand?
Well, I'm not a marketeer. There are other much more qualified marketeers in the room than me, but from my opinion, it's all that you described. It can be the logo, it can be if you have a set of colours that are important to you, it's then having those colours described as part of that logo. It's the name. It might be some key phrasing that you use. All those things are part of it. And again, it's deciding which is the most important. I have a client who, the most important thing actually was their logo. And that's the thing they protect. They're not bothered about the rest of it. They're quite happy for other people to copy it because because that's the logo is the thing that people recognise, because they have a retail product, and that's the thing they're going to look at. The name is not important. As I say, interesting, but so what? Lots of interesting stuff I'm kind of going through here, but so what? What's the impact to you? And the reality is you've got lots of other competing things in your life to do on a day-to-day basis which are demanding money, and this stuff is just an irrelevance, isn't it, or not? And the key really, from my perspective, is not actually saying you need to spend any money on it, it's more spending some time on it and thinking about what you're doing. Because like any business, you have a marketing plan, you have a sales plan, you need to have an asset plan about your ideas and what you're going to do about protecting them. Because if you don't, then if something happens, you're going to be hit sideways by it. And there's some really simple things, especially in the world of digital. One of the most important things I always recommend to a digital company is who owns your code? Where is it? Is it a development company, you developing it? If so, is it in a safe hub? Those kind of things are relatively cheap to do, and they are quite useful to you in terms of making sure it's protected. If you've got a really unique idea in terms of proposition, don't just email that whole proposition out to prospective clients. Put it on a portal. Let them come in. It's great for you to then understand, one, if they've actually read the presentation because they've logged on. Two, if they then aren't ever going to be a customer, then you can deny them access to that. And they can't then publicise and take that further forward. Gives you in control, and they're relatively simple things to do, and they're not costing loads of money, that actually mean that you're protecting your ideas. It really is key that you assess the risk, because as a tiny startup that no one knows about, not many people are going to be that interested in your idea. As you get bigger and get more publicity, that's where it gets more exciting. The number of times I've had to do work for clients where they've had a big splash in the paper, and everybody's got excited about having that big splash, and actually what then has happened is that other people have said, oh, that's a great idea, I'm going to copy various elements of it, either taking domain names or doing something similar in a different market, and that positive publicity that's happened has actually then been very negative to the business. So it's assessing that risk and deciding the value of what you're doing versus the risk. And I think if you can do that, then you've got an opportunity to really start to develop what you do. The bottom here I'm talking about competitors, because actually they're not going to be any different to you. They're going to have strengths and weaknesses. And the great thing about most IP is out there, it's actually publicly available. You can quite easily go and see what trademarks they've got, what domain names they've got, what they put on their website, what it tells them about them. And it's really useful for you, if you've got a great idea, to then say, how different is my idea to my competition? And when I've listed out my great ideas that make me unique, if I go and look at their website, how many of them are similar, how many are different, how do I change it to make us look and feel different? And that assessment is quite important. And again, it's also an assessment important for any funding. Because if you're going into a funding meeting and someone says, why are you saying that you're going to register 20 trademarks around the world, and you say, well, actually, our nearest competition has 60, the investor will probably go, okay, I kind of get why you're doing it. So it's that assessment, in exactly the same way you assess how they manage their sales, you need to assess how they protect themselves. It also often gives you an idea of where you can take advantage of them. This information is free, it's publicly available. You should use it because it's there for you to actually get an understanding of how you can offer something unique and different to them. Okay. I've tried to give you a very, very quick overview of everything here, and what I've said is that if you've got any specific questions, I'm happy to do a session one-on-one as I'm here today. But is there any general questions you've got from what I've just gone through?
I've got a general question. One of the things that we get an awful lot with people coming into the hub and to Digital Jersey is they'll say, particularly with things like apps. So somebody will come in, they say they've got this great app idea. Now, they're absolutely panicky that they're going to lose it because as soon as they start talking to people, somebody will copy it, whatever. What advice do you give to people who say they might have a great app, how they go about protecting that? Because you can't obviously just protect the code or anything like that.
No, so code's really difficult, and depending on how you approach it, it can be really difficult to protect an app. So there's 2 or 3 things. One, if you're developing it yourself, you've got the most protection because obviously you know what you're coding and the rest of it. Invariably, I suspect most of the people coming here will be going to a developer. So therefore, then the relationship you have with that developer company is really quite important. And getting a contract which makes it clear that you own the code is quite important. The other element really is saying, okay, an app's great, and the idea of an app's great, but most apps will evolve and develop. What people try and do is to have a brand that expresses what the app does, and that's the thing that continues going forward. If you look at things like Uber has developed and changed that app from where it first released to now hugely, but the brand stayed the same. So if you're going to have an app that you think is going to be copied, you should invest also in the brand and the expression of what it is so that people actually understand what the app does, and it's something that then they're reminded of and seeing that you're the one to get. Brand, if you ever try and find an app, finding an app on any of the App Store or in Apple is really difficult because there's so many of them. If you have a brand name and that you're clear on that brand name and you push it, that's probably one of the most important things to help you actually get there and to protect it.
So there's no way you can protect an app idea as such. So once you've launched it, anybody can then go in and copy it and what have you.
Yeah, much. I mean, in the US there are what they call method patents, but they are extraordinarily difficult to get. And again, it's all about the worth of it, because if you're trying to do that as a small business, then you've got to go and rely on the US courts. It's quite painful. Do you want to do that? Again, with some of the stuff that with app developers, when we have conversations with them, it's about refreshing the app, keeping the app fresh. So don't release everything that's killer about the app on day one. Just keep releasing, drip feeding stuff to keep your app current. Because that's the thing that actually keeps people excited about an app, is that constant, oh, it does this, oh, this is really exciting, it does that. And that's how you keep ahead, by keeping that idea chain for the app as not just, there we go, the app's amazing, go use it, other people can copy it, but keep developing it, keep enhancing it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So I have a related question. So software patents are difficult, we understand that, but how dangerous or how important is the presence of competing patents, like existing patents in the US? Say you have an app, you have software technology, which no one else is using. But where you go, you look up the patent database, and somewhere in 1995, someone just wrote the patent. Yeah, we thought about it. But so they didn't do nothing about that, but it's there. So how important is that?
Well, the whole US approach to IP is really difficult, and also really potentially really expensive. There are what they call patent trolls, who are people who've come up with what often people say are obvious ideas and register them. And the way that the US system works is it's very slow, very cumbersome, but there's loads of these ideas that have been registered by very smart people who are going, technology might go in this direction, I will cover it. And they can trip up very large businesses. Apple and Samsung have a lot of money spent on picking up trolls.
Do those patents have a life?
They do. So every patent has a life. So it's 15 years typically for a normal patent, and you can get extensions for medical patents. But back to your point, it's there, it's sitting there. 2 or 3 things you can do. One, what you want to try and do is whatever your idea is, you need to take that patent, if it's out there, and assess where you can be different. Because the key thing is actually working at, as long as you can then demonstrate some difference to that idea, then that's actually offers you some opportunity. If the problem with any patent process is that if they've got the time and the money, they can chase after you. the upside is that if you're here and you're small, they're probably not going to try and chase after you because their whole point is about money. The whole idea of patent control is that they're not trying to kill you, they're just trying to get revenue from you. So they typically chase after large businesses because they see that as an opportunity to get a regular income from that business, rather than chasing up after a startup that they kill and then what's the point of that?
And in practical terms, is software patents, are they any different from hardware?
They are harder to get a ruling on in the US courts, and they've become increasingly seen as, in the past, they were very lax as to what they gave as a patent, and they've become a lot stricter as to what they now register. So, depending on the problem with the whole US system, it's cumbersome and it's court-based, so it edges slowly forward and it changes as those court cases come to pass. And there's a number of them around software which are going to kind of change how it is approached. For you today in Jersey, worrying about your idea, I would say, one, try and make it as different as possible. Two, decide on when you're going to enter the US market and decide on how you're going to do that. You can take the bull by the horns, you could actually speak to them directly and get a license and explain your situation. As I say, they're not trying to kill you because the whole idea is about them getting a reasonable return from it. And potentially, you might be able to do a deal with them. Also, see how active they are. There are active trolls, and there are people who've done it, had a great idea, and then forgotten about it. So you can, again, use that public data to see if that person is prosecuting lots of cases, or they've got lots of rulings against them. There was one company I did some work with where they were trying to fight it, and a lot of these individuals see themselves as kind of almost like freedom fighters, and this one guy called himself the patent hawk, who was there to swoop in on the unsuspecting pigeons of industry flapping their way through, and they were saying, oh, we think we can beat him. It's like, no, look at all the cases he's won and how much money he now has amassed from how he's won it. He's got a huge war chest, and his approach is as somebody who's keen to take it through the whole process, and he's going to manage that process himself. You should settle. So it's decide on the individual.
But there are not only patent trolls. I think in the US it's a typical corporate culture. Every idea, whether or not it's been implemented or not by the employees of a sufficiently large corporation, is going through a patent system.
Yeah, I mean, and that's very true. They see it as a key part of their business. But there's no reason for you then not to get other patents, because again, in any patent conversation, it's a lot easier to have a conversation where you've also got something registered or filed. Because again, if you walk into a conversation where they've got 100 and you've got none, it's probably better that you have some that you filed and you've taken them further forward. But I think we can talk about it in some more detail. Any other more general questions? Yeah.
Say then that there's a patent troll in the USA or something who's got a patent on an idea similar to what you've got, and you're scared to go to the USA for that reason. So that you were able to host your app in the cloud or something, and the actual server hosting the app was in Europe or somewhere like that, but anyone from around the world could use it, so people from the US could still use your app,
Yep.
but they're not kind of running the actual algorithm to your app in the US, they're actually hosted on the server in Germany.
It's really difficult.
Does that make any difference? Does it make
Not
it
really. I mean, let's say, the whole patent approach in the US is more about how deep their pockets are and how much they want to go after you.
Yeah.
They will demonstrate, if they can, a link. If they can demonstrate a link, they'll try and prosecute you.
Okay.
Again, it's deciding on how likely they are to do that. People can get very scared, because if you go out and you can find lots of patents that you can get very scared about, you need to think about the risk and think about how you're going to manage it, and also think about their motivation. For a large corporation, if it's a large corporation, then it's different, because they're then looking to squeeze you out, because that's why they've got the patent in the first place. Yeah. If it's an individual, they're looking to get some revenue out of you. So you have to decide how you're going to approach it, depending on who owns that patent and what you think their strategy is going to be with it. there's always a way through. It's just a question of assessing the risk. Any other questions?
Yes, what's the procedure for protecting a copyright?
Depends on the country. And again, so in the UK, it's just actually saying that you've registered it and having a record of the fact you've got that copyright.
Where do you register?
You don't, weirdly, you don't have to. You just have to say that you've registered it and have a version on the date that you said you'd actually created it. In the US, you actually have to register with an attorney. In China, you have to actually apply for a registered copyright. Copyright is always interesting. It's because again, it's for you as businesses. It's working out. I create a copy. Actually, sometimes it's a good thing that other people copy it, but it's working out where it is. And there's lots of great tools that you can use, free tools on the internet, where you can actually put your copy in and see where it's gone in the internet. And again, same with code. I'd always recommend that if you're using a development company, always check the code to make sure it's not open source. But 9 times out of 10 where you're using a development company, they'll often insert open source into what you would believe to be code you've bought, and then you, as the buyer of that code, have an issue with the person who's got copyright on that code that was open source.
What tools would you recommend for both code and for general copyright checking?
I can give you a list. There's a number of them. So that's interesting, obviously, because it depends on what you do in which country, there's different ones.
Yes, I found a site where you can actually pay the money to register. I mean, if I create a character for a book, which I've done, I copyright it and I put it on that website, so that, and a picture of the image. So
I mean, that's great. You don't have to do that in the UK. The benefit of it is that it's a permanent record. So the issue always comes with copyright, saying, oh, I had the same idea on the same day or a week before. And it's about demonstrating that you've had that idea at a certain point. As soon as you publish it on the internet, kind of, and the date that's been published, again, there's lots of exciting tools on the internet where you can have history of your website so that you can see what's happened on your website at any time, so any changes. So again, it's very easy for you to demonstrate on the 4th of April your character was actually put onto that website and it's yours, and that compares to somebody else. But it's complex. Your best bet normally is to see where it is and to try and have a conversation with someone's company.
it'll be on Amazon next week.
Any other questions?
Just generally, I think you might already have answered it, but if you want to find out whether somebody else has already had the idea out there, there's no 1 or 2 places you go.
No.
There's a whole host of places.
That is the joy and the pain of this whole world, is that each country has its own process, and depending on, some countries are great, so the US and Europe are really easy to find stuff, and the majority of what you're going to find is going to come through those areas. And again, I can give you a list of websites that you can have to look at. More complicated countries like China, it becomes much more exciting to find stuff because you have to go through and trying to translate it. Japan is also important. What I would say, rather than actually worry about the country, is say where typically is innovation in what I do occurring, and then use that as the starting point, because it's a lot easier. You can spend a lot of money travelling the world and sieving things and getting all sorts of matches which aren't necessarily that relevant.
I always think that you have to be able, if you want to, you have to go down the route of protecting IP, but you also have to then be prepared to do something with it if it's been infringed.
That's very true.
So, so when you're thinking about what and how you're protecting, you also have to think about your appetite for defending it. And that can be significantly more costly than actually protecting it in the first place.
And I think that's I would absolutely agree with you. I think you have to really think about, but there are ways and means of protecting it. Again, social media is a wonderful thing. You can be nimble as a small business and say, right, what's my strategy if a big brand tries to squeeze me? Well, actually, the joy of social media is if you then say this big brand's trying to squeeze me, there's lots of people out there who's going to retweet it. If it's somebody who's copying you, again, you've got to think about your appetite to take them on in whichever country you're on, and you've got to decide if it's worth it or not. I work with a number of businesses that make fast-moving consumer goods, and they expect stuff to be copied. So most of the stuff they release is from a Christmas release. They release it, and their assumption is that by next Christmas it will be copied. So they see innovation as the most important thing, and that's where brand versus copying is always quite important. And they then do some with them because they've got a product and they know where they're being copied. 2 or 3 cunning things that we've done with them. One is that they have their Chinese manufacturer. We gave them quite a clear brief in their contract to allow them to take on any other Chinese competitors that are copying it.
Right.
And in a local country, they tend to be much more efficient than you could ever be defending your brand, because they've given them a financial incentive to do so, as in if they sell less widgets because of the fact that someone else is copying it, it becomes very efficiently self-regulating.
Right.
And you don't really want to know what they're doing, it's fine, but they then manage it for you. But again, it's thinking laterally as to how you do that and that defence, and what you can afford and how you can then manage that defence. It doesn't necessarily have to always be litigation, which is going to cost you a fortune and is potentially going to be 50-50.
Yeah.
But as I say, it's simple things. Like if you've got a great idea, keep it hidden in a way that other people can't get to. If you've got something that's really important to you, don't tell everybody about it, if that's the killer thing. Or if it is something that you're happy to share, explain why you're sharing it. So it's just thinking about what it is and is it worth protecting, is it not?